What a finish!
Have you ever?
No, I've never.
Wow.
What a finish!
It's a beautiful setting for any sports stadium. The Rocky Mountains towering nearby. And inside Pikes Peak International Raceway, the fans are ready to see 250 miles of NASCAR Busch Series racing on this very fast 1-mile track.
Final lap for Matt Kenseth. Earnhardt makes the pass entering turn 1 as the fans are on their feet. And we've got a great finish coming your way.
For starters, we have to go back. The United States' first dedicated car racing track, the Milwaukee Mile, held its first race back in 1903. Of course, back then, cars kind of looked like this, but it's still a monumental event. This was the Maiden Oval. It's a shape of racetrack so deeply rooted in American motorsports that it's been replicated countless times ever since. Now, when you think of a racetrack, you're probably thinking of maybe a 3-mile road course or a high-panked super speedway, but back then, there was only one track, the short track. Most were just repurposed baseball diamonds and horse racing tracks, but either way, dirt ovals began popping up all over the place. And once Prohibition ended, moonshiners had nothing to do with their souped-up rides except race them. Then sectioning bodies like NASCAR began hosting year-long campaigns, and the rest is history.
I say I got into it when I was born because my mom and dad were racing cars, and they quit when I was about 3. But I had enough of a memory, and I grew up with my mom and dad in their garage business. And when I turned about 17, I decided I wanted to build a race car and go race.
In some places, motorsport became as traditional a pastime as football or baseball. But as racing became more popular, bigger and better venues began taking center stage. The world's very first speedway was built in Indiana. It took the world by storm, hosting the illustrious Indianapolis 500.
Again, growing up, there was 2 races that meant something. We didn't watch Pikes Peak on TV back in the 60s when I was really young. But we did the Indianapolis 500, and we'd go down to the theaters because you couldn't watch it on TV. But that was an event. My dad and mom would take me every year to watch it.
Other races like the 12 Hours of Sebring and Daytona 500 drew similar praise, and car racing had cemented its place in the American sports scene. However, as these giants grew in popularity, their less popular predecessors were getting tuned out. With the closure of Myrtle Beach Speedway in 2020, racetrack closures were brought back into the headlines. And here in Colorado, it's all too common. Englewood, Colorado Springs, Lakeside, all havens for some of the best racing this side of the Mississippi, and all currently defunct. One was turned into a business park, another was purchased as land for the U.S. military, and the other sits in the middle of a parking lot, enveloped in brush and trees growing up through the cracks in the asphalt. There have been multiple rumors of demolition, but it still sits to this day. This is nothing new. Plenty of tracks all around the world have undergone the same treatment, or lack of treatment. Hundreds, if not thousands, of venues from all manner of motorsports have either been repurposed or completely abandoned. Of all the races run in NASCAR's history, over half of them have been at tracks that are currently inactive. There's over 150 different racetracks left in the dust. And of those 150, 135 of them are considered short tracks. At one point, that list included another Colorado track. But thanks to new ownership and a new vision, it escaped that grim fate so many have realized.
It was for sale, the Speedway. And actually, I had this fantasy that it'd be really cool to have your shop in the middle of a racetrack. And I spent the evening, Grid Life was here, a series that races drift cars, and they blend a little bit of music. At that point, it was an EDM concert going on that night. And I just had the blinders off that I had in NASCAR, and they were off. And I saw all this opportunity with younger kids with a desire to be down here with their own drift cars and putting their own money in their cars, and which sounds like, well, how else would you do it? But after you're in Cup for so long with sponsors, it's quite humbling.
Events like these have given the track new purpose and new life, which is far more than what can be said for most other places. It may not have prospects of hosting high-profile races anymore, that has an even brighter future in a different market.
When I came here, I saw something probably different. I immediately was just like, man, there's opportunity here like crazy. I think what I did was brought a big push and some energy into saying, okay, let's put a business plan together to build some festivals that have got music and motorsports involved together. And it put us on the map quicker than it would have had we tried to build it with things being normal.
It's hard to find a more unique venue for a concert or a car show than a racetrack, which is why it will live on for years to come. One of the most infamous examples of abandoned racetracks is the North Wilkesboro Speedway. It had been around since NASCAR's inception and would consistently draw in sellout crowds of diehard race fans. But during the 90s, NASCAR was in a boom period, and they wanted to expand westward. California, Nevada, Texas, and Kansas were all states that got shiny new tri-oval racetracks. It was clear that NASCAR was becoming a national sport, but to move into bigger markets, you have to leave the smaller ones behind. But unlike the rampant populace of Fontana, Fort Worth, or Las Vegas, North Wilkesboro had a population of less than 5,000. So every time the circus came to town, it was a big deal. The Speedway brought in tons of tax revenue and income for local businesses. So when it was forced to make way for the newer tracks and close its doors, all that revenue was gone. And it forced the town into a recession that's still reeling from today. Meanwhile, those bigger markets consistently have had the lowest attendance figures of the entire schedule, with some of America's greatest race car drivers being forced to compete in front of mostly empty grandstands. In the pursuit of greener pastures, NASCAR left some of its biggest fans behind, which is emblematic of what's been happening more and more. The corporatization of motorsport, transformation from genuine competition to cash grab entertainment. But no matter how green those pastures may seem, they'll never escape the fact that racing is about more. It's about family. It's something that mothers and fathers can share with their sons and daughters. A legacy passed from generation to generation.
My family was everything because the support, the basic foundational pieces that we need as kids, as children, to know that you're supported and you're supported in anything that you want to do passion-wise, if you have a passion for it. My dad would have loved me to be a doctor or anything other than get into auto racing, but I think he knew early on I probably was destined for it. So when I got out of high school and I said I wanted to race, they 100% supported me and said, okay.
The love of racing burns deep. We all know how it feels to be stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, just hoping to break free from that gridlock. In those moments, you'll never find a better feeling than seeing miles of open road ahead of you, just waiting to be tread. Short track racing gives that feeling to aspiring racers everywhere, because for them, this is their gateway, not just for finding success, but also finding their passion. And it happens every weekend, all over the country. Rookies and veterans alike fighting for the top spot on the podium. So next time you hear the sound of thundering engines in the distance, consider following them, because someday they may fall silent.